Torchlight trembles across the damp stone walls, casting jagged shadows that dance like restless spirits. The chapel is silent, save for the occasional drip of water from the vaulted ceiling, each drop echoing like a distant heartbeat. The cold gnaws at the knight's knees as he kneels upon the uneven flagstones, the chill crawling beneath his mail and pressing against his spine. Gold embroidery glints from his surcoat, worn yet proud, a silent testament to past victories and fleeting favor. His fingers wind around prayer beads, the smooth wood polished by years of devotion, now clutched not in hope, but in a trembling attempt to anchor himself against the storm gathering both outside and within. He murmurs the names of saints, whispering each syllable with a desperation that tastes like ash on the tongue. Each prayer, each bowed head, feels smaller than the world he once sought to command. The chapel's incense, heavy with resin, smoke curling into the shadows, does little to mask the damp chill, nor the metallic tang carried on the wind. Somewhere beyond the thick stone walls, an army moves, its approach muffled by distance, but growing insistent. The wind brings with it the faint cries of sentries, the scraping of iron wheels over cobbled streets, the low thrum of horses' hooves and step. Soon, he knows, the walls will tremble under the weight of banners and blood, but which banner will betray him is still unknown. A subtle shift of air betrays the movement of something unseen. A folded parchment slides across the cold stone floor, brushing against his boots, carried by some careful hand. He hesitates, a chill that has nothing to do with the chapel's stone seeping into his chest. The seal, a pressed sigil, unfamiliar yet sinister in its symmetry, glares at him like an accusation. His fingers tremble as he lifts it, feeling the faint impression of wax and deceit against his skin. The missive speaks in whispers that only the heart can hear, a language older than steel and older than loyalty. Desperation has a voice, and it is neither noble nor forgiving. The knight's hands tighten around the beads. The smooth, familiar touch of the wood should offer comfort, a tether to faith, to order, to something unbroken. Instead, it serves only to emphasize the razor's edge now cutting through the chapel's sanctity. He breathes, shallow, tasting the sharp tang of fear that mingles with the incense. Outside, the wind carries the distant clash of anvil and hammer, the echo of preparation, of armies tightening their ranks. But none of that prepares him for the quiet cruelty now encased in folded parchment. A lord once trusted, a master once revered, now rendered fragile by ambition, by hunger for survival, by the faintest gleam of greed. He recalls the corridors he has walked in loyalty, the echo of his own boots over stone floors polished by the passage of centuries, each echo a vow to serve, to guard, to obey. Now, the corridors feel alien, as though every shadow is a knife poised above him, every torch a witness to treachery. The chapel seems smaller, the air heavier, the scent of tallow burning on the altar mingling with damp stone and betrayal. The walls, which once bore witness to sermons and song, now press upon him like a judge's gavel, each brick a silent witness to a covenant fraying at the edges. He slides the parchment open with deliberate care, the faint rustle of paper sounding like a scream in the hollow space. The words, precise, measured, yet dripping with intent, speak of pacts forged in the quiet desperation of men who have nothing left to lose. His eyes trace the ink, following the curves of letters that might as well have been daggers cutting into the soul. There is no malice in the hand that wrote them, only necessity, only the cold arithmetic of survival. And yet, for him, for this knight whose heart still clings to honor like a shield, it is poison, a slow suffocation in the quiet sanctuary of faith. He presses the parchment to his chest, feeling the weight of choice settle upon him. Every oath he has taken, every vow whispered into stone walls and over altar candles, now collides with the sharp geometry of this new reality. Honor is no longer measured in victories or titles, but in the silence that follows a secret betrayed. The beads bite into his palms, worn smooth from years of devotion, their edges softened by time, unlike the hard, uncompromising edge of human cunning. The chapel seems to hold its breath, each flicker of torchlight a ghostly audience to the duel unfolding within him. A distant scream splits the night, carried faintly on the wind, though not from this place. The sound is enough to make the knight's heart hitch, to remind him that beyond the sanctity of stone and incense, the world is brutal and unrelenting. Each decision, each concealed whisper, could tip the scales toward ruin. He thinks of the men who will follow banners, who will die for causes they scarcely understand. He thinks of those who will be left to wonder, to grieve, to curse the fickle hand of fate. And in that thought, he feels the cold logic of betrayal, not as an abstract concept, but as a living, breathing force, tightening its grip on the corridors above. A candle guttering in its holder casts long shadows that stretch like reaching fingers across the floor. The knight rises, the weight of his mail heavy, the soft clang of metal against stone a metronome to his racing heart. He moves to the altar, laying the parchment beside a book of prayers, an ironic juxtaposition. Faith and deceit resting side by side, the sacred and profane entwined in silence. He cannot yet read the future in the flames, but he can feel its heat pressing against him. Each breath carries the smell of burning tallow, damp stone, and the faint iron tang of impending conflict. The chapel is no longer a refuge, but a crucible, and he the metal being tested. For a long moment, he closes his eyes, letting the weight of memory anchor him. The prayers once whispered now echo in his mind as warnings, not blessings. He sees the faces of those who trusted him, imagines the betrayal unfolding beyond these walls, the armies moving like tides indifferent to the lives caught in their pull. Honor is fragile, loyalty fragile, yet both are the only shields against the darkness of human ambition. The chapel, in its austere beauty, seems to whisper back at him. The world is unforgiving, and mercy is a choice seldom granted. Finally, he opens his eyes, letting the torchlight flicker across the parchment, across the walls, across the hollow spaces within himself. He knows the choice is his alone, to preserve the fragile remnants of faith and loyalty, or to succumb to the cold logic of survival. Outside, the wind carries the first hints of an army's banners, the low murmur of men and beasts pressing against stone and soil. Somewhere, a trumpet sounds, though he cannot yet tell if it is heralding salvation or doom. He steps back from the altar, letting the beads fall once more into his hand, their smooth surface grounding him. The chapel exhales with him, a silence filled with expectation, with the ghosts of oaths broken and kept. He moves to the doorway, torch in hand, feeling the draft that carries the scent of rain and iron. Beyond, the world waits, indifferent to the sanctity of stone and prayer. Behind him, the parchment rests upon the altar, a promise of the chaos to come, the first note of a symphony in which loyalty and betrayal will dance together until the final, unforgiving chord. And as he steps into the night, the chapel fading behind him like a memory, he feels the weight of every whispered word, every glance, every folded piece of paper. Empires will fall, not by sword alone, but by the quiet cruelty that slides beneath doors, the subtle fracture of trust, the silent measures of ambition. The night breathes deeply, the chill of night and stone mingling in his lungs, and whispers his own prayer, not for victory, not for mercy, but for the strength to endure what has already begun. The torchlight flickers one last time against the walls before the darkness swallows the chapel entirely, leaving only the echo of loyalty tested and the shadow of betrayal waiting beyond the gates. Rain hammered the battlements with a fury that seemed almost sentient, a relentless percussion against stone. Banners twisted and snapped in the wind, their once proud colors muted to a sodden gray. Lightning split the sky, brief and cruel, illuminating the jagged silhouette of the keep against the storm's black maw. In the chaos of nature, the castle held its own secret tempest within. Within the Lord's private chamber, the air was thick with wax smoke and the acrid scent of wet leather. A council had gathered around a carved oak table, its surface etched with scars of centuries, maps splayed like fallen leaves, delicate lines bleeding into one another from spilled ink and rainwater tracked in from the corridors. Shadows from flickering candles leapt and retreated across the walls, clawing at the faces of men who had long since learned that loyalty and survival were not always aligned. The eldest son leaned forward, his amber eyes catching the candlelight and holding it with a strange hunger, a heat that seemed to draw the room into its orbit. His fingers drummed on the table, restless, calculating, each tap echoing like a heartbeat in the tension silence. Around him, men murmured in hushed tones, the language of caution and strategy, but his gaze pierced them, unyielding, as if he were measuring their worth against an invisible ledger of desire and fear. Outside, the stables shivered under the hooves of anxious horses, their nostrils flaring against the storm, their muscles tensing beneath slick coats. Even they knew, instinctively, that something unseen and terrible had taken root within the stone walls. A sealed letter slipped across the table, unnoticed save for the most vigilant eyes. It traveled beneath a sleeve, hand to hand, its paper damp and creased, ink smudged like the footprints of ghosts. The courier smiled with an ease born of trust, his lips curled in the familiarity of bloodlines and promises, yet in his hand rested treachery, wrapped neatly in ceremony. The contents would bind alliances to the house's enemies, forging a chain that would choke the very life from the keep. He passed it with the civility of a servant, but each fold of paper carried the weight of betrayal, the weight of unmade futures. The room seemed to inhale the tension, walls pressing inward as if listening. Candle flames flickered nervously, the shadows stretching toward the ceiling like grasping fingers reaching for truths better left unseen. The eldest son's amber eyes lingered on the letter, yet he did not move. Somewhere in the corner, a young knight swallowed hard, the taste of iron and fear rising unbidden as he realized the full scope of the danger now circulating like a virus among them. Outside, rain pelted the stones with unrelenting rhythm. Torches along the battlements quivered, their orange tongues bending under the wind. The air smelled of wet earth and fear, the scent of 1,000 hooves clattering in stalls, of straw soaked into mud, of sweat and the sharp tang of anticipation. Every shadow was a sentinel, every whispered word a dagger poised at the back of the throat. The storm did not merely batter the keep. It mirrored the upheaval within, a tempest of ambition, loyalty, and the slow, inevitable unraveling of trust. The letter found its resting place in the hands of a man who smiled with the ease of kinship, yet his heart beat with the rhythm of impending ruin. He held it like a torch in the dark, illuminating secrets no one was yet ready to confront. Alliances were written, broken, and rewritten in ink that would never fade, ink that would seep into the very mortar of the castle and stain its history with treachery. The air felt heavier with every passing moment, as if the walls themselves absorbed the gravity of what was about to transpire. Conversations faltered, words hung suspended, unspoken, each syllable weighed against the possibility of discovery. The eldest son leaned closer, and in the amber depths of his gaze there was an acknowledgement that destiny itself could be commandeered or destroyed. Outside the chamber, the storm's voice was both cover and herald, masking the quiet conspiracies, heralding the inevitable betrayal. The horses shivered and stamped, hooves slapping against the wet earth, echoing the rhythm of hearts caught between loyalty and self-interest. When the candlelight danced across the letter, its wax seal gleamed wetly, as if mocking the very notion of honesty. The act was simple, ceremonial even, yet it was the fulcrum upon which the fate of a dynasty teetered. Every alliance forged by marriage, every shield raised in defense, every oath sworn over wine and blood now hung in precarious balance. And in that balance, the slightest tremor would shatter generations, leaving only grief and whispered cautionary tales in its wake. The storm began to retreat, though the clouds still churned, pregnant with thunder yet to come. Silence seeped into the corridors, heavy and watchful. The keep itself seemed to absorb the tension, the stones remembering the weight of ambition and the sting of betrayal. Each corner held a memory of whispered plots, each archway the echo of loyalty frayed and broken. The letter, unassuming in its betrayal, had already begun its work, a silent architect of chaos, threading its influence through the veins of the house. By nightfall, the walls would be silent, yet they would speak in memory. The council would disperse, footsteps muted against the wet stone, hearts burdened with knowledge they dared not name aloud. Even the eldest son, his hunger momentarily tempered, felt the tremor of history shift beneath him, a subtle quake that would ripple across walls, through marriages, across battlefields yet unrolled. Outside, the last flashes of lightning illuminated the banners, still twisted and soaked, and for a brief instant they seemed to mourn along with the keep, their colors weeping into the mud. And in that quiet aftermath, in the storm's fading echo, the keep would remember the day loyalty broke. It would remember the hands that smiled while scheming, the eyes that watched while plotting, the hearts that betrayed while bound by blood. Every stone, every shadow, every gust of wind through the empty battlements would carry the weight of that betrayal, a silent testament to ambition, fear, and the unspoken truths that shaped dynasties. The storm had passed, yet the storm within lingered, a quiet, unyielding force, and the castle, ever vigilant, awaited the next tremor. A brittle dawn seeps through the thatched roofs, spilling pale silver over streets churned to mud by frost and toil. The village exhales in slow, damp plumes, breath of humans, smoke from peat fires, the faint odor of wet straw and churned earth. Each house leans on its neighbor, a fragile line of timber and clay, their walls stained with soot, their thatch crowns crusted in frost. Inside one of these dwellings, a mother crouches beside a hearth that shivers with half-life, stirring a porridge too watery to sustain, yet enough to quiet the gnawing emptiness in her children. Their small bodies huddle close, shivering beneath threadbare blankets that offer warmth as thin as hope. Outside, the castle towers pierce the dawn, gilded sunlight catching on stone and banner alike, banners that dance with the wind's indifference. The distant clang of a metal pan, the measured steps of servants carrying trays heavy with roasted meat, the low hum of pipes and whispered commands, all merge into a rhythm that mocks the quiet suffering below. The scent of roasting flesh drifts over the village like a taunt, sweet and cruel, cutting through the smoke of peat fires, through the tang of damp earth, reminding all who breathe it of what lies beyond the mud and frost. Plenty, and the cold divide that separates those who have from those who endure. A boy lingers at the edge of the courtyard, fingers blue and stiff, eyes tracing the glittering procession above. Each tray borne by a servant shines with brass and silver, the crusted meat steaming, glistening with fat. He watches the practiced steps, the precise movements, the careful avoidance of eye contact with the world beneath the castle walls. Hunger presses against his ribs, a relentless shadow that neither sleep nor hope can fully disperse. He imagines, for a fleeting moment, that one tray might topple, that a loaf might roll toward him, warm and whole. And for a heartbeat, he believes it possible. But the world is still, and the trays move on, a silent parade of indifference. The village itself seems to hold its breath. Each broken wheelbarrow, each frost-cracked pot, each scattered grain a testament to endurance. The stones in the street are slick with ice. The mud grips boots and bare feet alike, as if the earth itself conspires to slow those who labor unseen. From the thatched roofs, smoke curls into the cold air, rising in thin, pale plumes that merge with the mist above the castle. A bridge of smoke, fragile and fleeting, connects two worlds, one of excess and one of survival, a reminder that the opulence of feasting rests on the backs of those who toil. The mother's hands shake as she lifts the spoon to her children's mouths. Her fingers are red and cracked from water drawn from frozen wells, her arms thin and lined with the memory of repeated winters. She murmurs prayers under her breath, low, half-formed, the syllables carrying a weight heavier than stone. Each whisper is a plea for strength, for warmth, for the simple miracle of a day that does not end in hunger. She looks to the horizon where the castle towers catch the sun, imagining the music that will rise from the great hall, the clatter of silverware, the laughter of those who will never know the ache of cold fingers and empty bellies. Her lips tighten, a silent acknowledgement. The world is vast and indifferent, but she endures. Children stir beside her, small and fragile as frost-touched leaves. One shivers, and she drapes a blanket over his shoulders, the fabric frayed and thin, but offering the illusion of comfort. The other traces the rim of a broken pot, eyes wide with curiosity and hunger. Outside, a rooster crows, sharp and discordant, mingling with the faint clang of kitchen implements from the castle kitchens, each sound marking the invisible labor that feeds a spectacle the village cannot partake in. The rhythm is relentless, a drumbeat of survival, of sacrifice unseen, of lives spent feeding those who will never know their names. A sudden gust of wind rattles the doors, bringing the scent of smoke from the castle, of roasting meat, of the peat fires struggling against the cold. And in this crucible of mud, fire, and cold stone, human ambition and desire collided with the sacred bonds of kinship. Beyond the walls, the night was alive with noise, the whip of rain against banners, the groan of timber under pressure, the distant, mournful cry of some unseen creature driven mad by the tempest. In the private chamber, the greatest storm was invisible, contained in the subtle movements of hands and eyes, in the unspoken knowledge of betrayal. Every member of the council felt it, even if only subconsciously, the sense that the foundation beneath them was beginning to crumble, that their world would never again feel stable. And when the first pale light of dawn crept across the battlements, it revealed a keep changed. The banners hung limp, sodden and battered, like the spirits of men forced to bend to circumstance. The earth outside was churned and slick with rain and mud, but inside, the true devastation had already begun. The letter had found its recipient, the promises had been read, and in the quiet corners of the keep, whispers of distrust took root. Silent as shadows, they spread through corridors and chambers, touching hearts and minds that had once been united. In the aftermath, the walls would hold their silence, heavy as grief, a witness to the fracture that had begun. Every stone seemed to remember the tension, the betrayals that passed like ghosts through the night. The stables, once alive with anxious movement, now echoed with the faint rustle of hay, the quiet sighs of animals sensing the change. The eldest son lingered in the chamber, eyes fixed on the candlelight, seeing in its fragile flame both the possibility of conquest and the certainty of loss. Outside, the storm had faded, leaving only the lingering chill of wet stone and the smell of mud. But inside, the storm had merely shifted form, settling into the hearts of men and women who would carry its memory forward, a quiet promise of turmoil yet to come. And in that moment, the keep seemed to breathe with its own memory, the shadows stretching long, as if aware that loyalty had been broken. Outside, the horizon brightened with the soft promise of morning, yet the warmth of the sun could not reach the corners of the keep that had been touched by deceit. The day ahead would be shaped not by swords alone, but by the invisible currents of ambition, the quiet power of a single, well-timed betrayal, and the knowledge that even the strongest walls cannot contain the truth forever. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had only begun. The castle kitchens echoed with a symphony of labor, the clatter of iron pots striking stone, the hiss of fat from the roasting venison, the dull thump of bread loaves sliding from wooden peels. Smoke curled in lazy spirals, staining the low-ceiling beams with the color of old bones. A small servant girl moved through this chaos with quiet precision, her bare feet finding the cool stone between puddles of spilled water and melted wax. She paused only when a goblet, knocked from a tray, tipped onto the flagstones. Her hands, trembling from the chill, swept it up, unaware that her glance, fleeting and innocent, had captured a fragment of a world she would soon learn to fear. Across the polished corridor, in a hall framed by banners of red and gold, laughter rolled like brittle thunder. Nobles toasted with raised glasses, their voices rich with rehearsed camaraderie, masking secrets sharper than any blade in the armory. Between smiles, hands exchanged small bundles of copper and gold, coins so warm from the hearth's heat they seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of ambition. Each piece bore the invisible weight of choices made behind closed doors, decisions that could crush lives as effortlessly as one might crush a candle's flame. The girl's eyes, wide and uncomprehending, reflected a curiosity too tender for the poison she had glimpsed. Yet in that instant, a shadow passed through her, the first tremor of a world she did not yet understand. The kitchens themselves seemed to whisper in the corners, their soot-darkened walls alive with memory. The smell of burnt fat and spiced meat clung to every surface, a lingering witness to decades of hunger, toil, and whispered discontent. Here, the smallest acts could ripple outward into calamity. A spilled goblet, a clumsy footstep, a glance. Any might ignite a chain of consequences stretching far beyond these stone walls. The girl, sensing the weight of her inadvertent observation, pressed her palms against the damp stones, grounding herself against a sudden vertigo of fear. Above her, the noble's laughter hit its brittle peak, and then receded, leaving behind a current of murmured packs that might as well have been daggers in the dark. Through the narrow slit of a high window, wind clawed at the ivy, pulling it taut against the stone, like fingers seeking purchase on secrets. Each rustle seemed to echo the exchanges below, the copper and gold moving silently, invisibly, through hands meant to protect nothing but ambition. Outside, the air carried a hint of frost, of coming winter, and yet inside, the warmth of fire could not chase away the chill in the girl's chest. She knew, in a way she could not articulate, that the world was tilting, that the family she adored, those who had given her laughter, small scraps of kindness, the rarest taste of freedom, were vulnerable to fractures unseen. She had seen the first fracture, a crack as fine as a hairline, yet enough to let shadows creep through. In the hall, the noble smiles sharpened like the edge of scabbard. Names were whispered, alliances quietly cemented in the copper glow of candlelight. The girl's small hands gripped the cloth she carried, white fingers turning pale as she felt the unspoken tension thicken around her. Every detail became alive. The way a lord's gaze lingered too long, the subtle tilt of a head, the barely perceptible tightening of a jaw. She had witnessed betrayal in its most innocent form, a transaction so ordinary it passed unnoticed. Yet its consequences would be anything but. The coin, warm and heavy in an unseen palm, was a seed of ruin, destined to germinate in darkness, to grow into catastrophe that might reach her as easily as it might strike the proudest noble. The kitchen's fire hissed as the roast turned, sparks rising like fleeting omens into the blackened chimney. Shadows danced on walls lined with hanging knives, each blade catching the flicker and refracting it into tiny, fatal reflections. The girl's breathing slowed, trying to make sense of a rhythm she could not name. Each sound, the scrape of a chair, the clink of a ladle, the quiet shuffle of feet, felt amplified, imbued with portent. In that microcosm, betrayal was not a spectacle, not the clamor of swords or the roar of a siege, but a whisper, a tremor that threaded through the everyday. It was a quiet storm, capable of toppling the most stalwart of houses, eroding trust like water through stone. And yet, the castle itself seemed to hold its breath, aware of the currents beneath its walls. Stone corridors, damp and cool, bore witness to secrets as old as their mortar. They had absorbed years of plotting, of whispered plans that could shatter kinship with a single turn of the hand. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking loose ivy and carrying it across the battlements, as though even the natural world leaned in to observe the unfolding human drama. In that moment, the girl felt it all. The weight, the fragility, the sense that the ordinary was already extraordinary in its capacity to betray. She shivered, half from cold, half from the tremor of understanding, and pressed herself against the wall, a silent participant in a game she had not chosen to join. The coin's copper sheen lingered in her mind, a tactile emblem of everything hidden, everything capable of undoing generations. In that hall above, laughter rang hollow, a mask worn too long. The nobles' faces, carved by ambition, could not conceal the cracks beneath, and the girl, small and silent, had caught the reflection of those cracks, a mirror held up to innocence, to vulnerability, to the inevitability of loss. She sensed the slow, relentless motion of destiny turning, inexorable as the river outside the walls, and understood in a way no child, should that love, loyalty, and family could be undone with the subtle touch of metal and whisper. As the evening drew on, the kitchen fires burned lower, casting elongated shadows that stretched like fingers across the stone floor. The girl wiped her hands on her apron, eyes flicking once more toward the hall, where the distant glow of torchlight outlined the nobles in their ceremonial postures. She felt the weight of her own breath, her heartbeat sinking with the unspoken tension that filled the corridors. Beyond the walls, the wind carried a faint hint of rain, the first patter against the roof like the gentle drumbeat of warning. The castle, ancient and indifferent, had seen countless acts of treachery, countless moments where innocence stumbled into knowledge far too early. Tonight, it had watched another. In that dim, smoke-tinged light, the girl took a step toward the hearth, feeling the warmth seep into her frozen fingers, yet unable to shake the shadow she carried. Outside, the ivy trembled again, the wind a silent witness to the turning of events too vast to understand, too intricate to stop. Inside, the copper coins had vanished into hidden pockets, their secret weight shifting the fates of all who lived under these walls. And she, small and trembling, held only the memory of glance, a momentary revelation that would mark her forever. That betrayal, like smoke, rises silently, curls into the air, and leaves traces long after the fire itself has faded. As the first hints of night settled over the battlements, the girl pressed a hand to the cool stone and closed her eyes. She sensed, deep in the marrow of her bones, that the world she knew was tilting, that foundations she believed eternal were already shifting. In the silence, there was a promise, a tremor of what was to come, a story unfolding with quiet inevitability. And somewhere above, in the hall of brittle laughter and whispered gold, the wheels of destiny turned, unseen, unstoppable, and unforgiving. Moonlight drifts across the battlements, pale and deliberate, brushing the frost that clings stubbornly to a lone archer's quiver. Each arrow shivers in the cold, a brittle promise held against the dark. The wind whispers through the stone, carrying the sharp scent of pine, the distant curl of smoke from a hearth too far to warm these walls. Even the castle itself seems to hold its breath, as if it knows the weight of what will unfold before dawn. Shadows gather like conspirators in every nook, folding corners into themselves, hiding intentions as easily as the night hides the stars. Within the Lord's chamber, the candlelight flickers, throwing long, wavering shapes against the cold stone. Advisors cluster in muted conversation, voices low, each syllable measured, each pause a loaded dagger. The warmth of the hearth does little to soften the chill in the air, for in this room, loyalty is a currency as volatile as gold, and betrayal a language spoken in glances. One man leans forward, a hand brushing the table, fingers trembling ever so slightly, betraying more than he intends. Another nods, slow, deliberate, a nod that could seal fates. And between them, the Lord himself sits, silent, a crown heavy upon his brow, his eyes reflecting the dancing flame, yet hiding the storm within. Outside, the castle is a skeleton in the moonlight, battlements etched sharply against the sky, the moat below a black mirror, rippling with the distorted reflections of torches and branches. Once trusted faces are scattered across its waters, fragments of loyalty and affection turned to ghostly images, broken in the folds of ripples and shadow. Every gesture, every clasped hand, every carefully chosen word has begun to carry a dangerous weight. Friendship has become a masquerade. Promises are written in ink that can vanish with a single twist of fate. A brother-to-brother pact, forged in the fires of shared struggle, has been broken quietly, almost imperceptibly, the betrayal sliding between them like smoke through the cracks of a stone wall. A dagger, slender and cold, waits in the shadowed archway. Its presence is almost ceremonial, an unspoken punctuation in a sentence of treachery. It does not need to strike to speak its meaning. Its mere existence is a herald of severed bonds, a silent declaration that nothing will ever be as it once was. The frost on the battlements seems to reflect the tension, crystals forming and shattering underfoot like hearts in the grip of fear. The archway frames the knife in perfect symmetry, a monument to what has been lost and what is about to be taken. The air itself grows heavier, dense with the scent of impending doom, the kind that cannot be washed away by hoof fire or whispered prayers. The men within the chamber lean in, sharing words that sting, smooth as polished stone. Alliances are shifted in whispers, a quiet rearrangement of power that will echo through the generations. A hand laid on the table to seal an agreement is also a hand that can push, that can snatch away, that can betray without ever touching a weapon. And in the quiet of these exchanges, subtle glances pass between those who know. Knowledge lingers in the eyes of the silent, in the half-smile of the cautious, in the slight tightening of the jaw. Every movement becomes portentous, every breath an omen. The night itself seems to mourn the unraveling of lineage. The wind through the pines carries it like a dirge, rustling the branches against the stone walls. Snow drifts lightly against the battlements, softening edges yet deepening the silence. Even the moat seems to grieve, its black waters trembling under the silver kiss of moonlight. Reflections waver, faces melt into one another, and the sky above fractures into a web of clouds that the wind tears apart, scattering stars like shards of broken loyalty. One can almost hear the echo of generations falling into shadows, a soft, mournful sound that begins in the frost and lingers in the hollow chambers of the castle. From the battlements, the lone archer shifts, eyes scanning the horizon, muscles taut as drawn bowstrings. He is alone, but not lonely. He carries the burden of knowledge, the silent witness to what is being spun in the chamber below. The night carries with it a kind of inevitability, a pull toward what is coming, like a tide dragging all hearts into the same undertow. His fingers trace the fletching of his arrows, and though he does not speak, he feels the weight of every decision made behind closed doors. The frost underfoot crunches in faint accompaniment to the distant whisper of voices, and in that soundless chorus, a story unfolds of loyalty broken, of ambition burning quietly like embers in the dark. Inside, the Lord finally rises, movement deliberate, measured. Every step echoes against the stone, a drumbeat marking the passage from calculation to action. Advisors shrink back imperceptibly, but no hand reaches for the dagger hidden in the archway. For now is the time of words, the time when intention must be carved into reality before blood can be spilled. The conversation flows, venom hidden beneath courtesy, agreements twisted into betrayals. The walls themselves seem to absorb the malice, carrying it like a silent witness, holding the memory of every lie whispered and every promise broken. The dagger waits, still and silent, a reminder of mortality and consequence. Even without a single movement, it holds the room captive, a symbol of the unspoken and the unseen, the quiet violence that shadows every courtly smile. Outside, the moat mirrors this tension, water shimmering with the reflection of fractured loyalties, of faces once familiar now alien. Every ripple seems to whisper secrets, to remind the world that nothing is sacred, that trust is fragile and fleeting, that the cost of ambition is often measured in the currency of hearts and bloodlines. The night stretches, unbroken, carrying its secrets like a shroud over the castle. Frost clings stubbornly, wind hisses through battlements, and shadows gather with an almost sentient patience. The moonlight traces the edges of a world poised on the knife edge of change, silvering frost and steel alike. And in the silent spaces between heartbeats, between whispers and footfalls, the inevitability blooms. The pact is broken. The alliance shifts. What was once firm and unassailable has begun to unravel, quietly, inexorably, leaving behind a terrain of suspicion, longing, and dread. As the candle gutters, as smoke curls toward the ceiling, the Lord retreats to the window. He looks upon the moat, the battlements, the frost glinting like scattered gems, and wonders what will remain when the dawn comes. Shadows stretch long and thin across stone, and somewhere a torch winks out. Silence grows, wrapping itself around the castle like a living thing. The archway stands empty, yet the memory of the dagger lingers in the mind, a promise of consequences yet to arrive. Outside, the frost and the smoke, the ripple of water and the whispering wind, all conspire to tell the same truth, that nothing is permanent, that bloodlines are fragile, and that every choice carries the weight of centuries. In this stillness, in this haunting pause, the castle exhales. The night swells with inevitability, and even the heavens seem to mourn, weeping faintly in silver light over the unraveling of lineage, the quiet severance of bonds that were thought eternal. Every heart beats with anticipation and dread. Every shadow holds a secret, and the world seems balanced on the delicate edge between loyalty and betrayal, between hope and the cold embrace of inevitability. The archer tightens his grip on his bow, feeling the frost bite into his fingers, and gazes down toward the chamber, toward the flickering candlelight and the long shadows of men who will shape the future. He senses what is coming, even if he cannot name it, and the weight presses down like stone on his chest. The night waits, the frost waits, and in that suspended moment, every secret, every betrayal, every half-truth, every silent oath hangs in the balance. The story is not over. It has only just begun, and the dawn will demand its reckoning. The harp strings quiver under a solitary hand, each note a fragile whisper that shivers through the gallery. The stone beneath seems to drink the sound, letting it seep into the marrow of the building itself, where shadows lean closer to listen. Dust motes drift lazily in shafts of pale morning light, caught between the motion of the bow and the silence of the stone corridors. Somewhere above, a laugh flutters, a single, careless note among the carefully measured rhythms of power. But here, in the gallery, time bends. It holds its breath. At the tall, mullioned window, a noble woman in violet and ermine leans lightly against the cold stone. Her hands clutch a folded parchment, the wax seal still unbroken, yet heavy with threat. The riders across the misted fields appear like ghosts summoned by the tune. Their silhouettes, dark against silver fog, carry promises and peril alike. She watches, her eyes tracing the rhythmic rise and fall of their banners, imagining the consequences of a single misplaced word, a whispered secret, a faltering step in the dance of allegiance. The harp's voice trembles as if it too senses the weight, the hidden gravity that presses down on her heart. The scent of lavender rises from a modest pot near the sill, mingling with the acrid tang of smoke curling from the hearth below. It is a delicate perfume against the harsher reality of stone corridors and courtiers whose laughter drifts upward like wind-blown leaves. Every smile she sees, every bowed head, hides motives sharper than the swords tucked at waistbands. She feels their eyes, though not upon her, and knows that their thoughts wander in secret chambers of ambition. One misstep, and loyalty will crumble, leaving only ruin in its place. Her mind drifts, threading through generations of her house, echoes of ancestors whose faces appear in the tapestry, stitched into history with threads of gold and shadow. She imagines them watching now, silent in their judgment, as decisions of the present threaten to unravel the legacy they fought to preserve. The harpist's fingers move with delicate precision, a dialogue of tension and release, each note a mirror of the intrigue unfolding in the halls. Below, the courtiers chatter, their words a river of shallow currents, unknowing of the riptide gathering beneath. Negotiations are being shaped by glances and half-spoken promises. A cup of wine passes from hand to hand, a symbol of agreement, though no heart here is free of scheming. She imagines the hidden chambers where plans twist like creeping ivy, where alliances are stitched and unraveled in the space of a breath. Each meeting, each secret confession, carries a weight that could topple houses, drown fortunes, and scatter bloodlines across the unforgiving soil. She folds the parchment lightly, feeling the edges dig into her palm. Her pulse quickens, though no one below could hear it against the laughter and clatter. The seal, red as a dying rose, seems to throb in response to the harp's song. Inside it lies a truth both delicate and fatal, an arrangement of convenience meant to secure safety but threatening to ignite betrayal. She sees it in every line, every curve of ink pressed into the fragile sheet. A marriage, a union of convenience, designed to mask the hand that will strike next. And the hand is not hers to command. A hush falls over the gallery as a single chord hangs in the air, vibrating against the stones like a heartbeat. She closes her eyes, inhaling the mingled scent of lavender and smoke, letting the tension coalesce into a tangible weight pressing upon her chest. Here, in this suspended moment, The world teeters on the edge of harmony and collapse. Civilization and treachery walk a knife's edge together. Each note of the harp a cautionary whisper. A wrong glance, a careless word, an unnoticed gesture, and the delicate structure of her house will shatter like a crystal goblet thrown to the floor. Beyond the window, the riders inch closer, their armor catching the faint sun in glints of silver. Mist curls around their hooves, muting the sound of their approach, yet she senses the inevitability of their arrival. They carry intentions as unspoken as her own doubts. She imagines the convergence of destinies, the meeting of wills that will either fortify or annihilate all she has inherited. She imagines the ripple of consequences, stones falling in a long cascade that will strike unseen but relentless. The harp's melody turns soft, almost hesitant, as if it too senses the peril in the air. She listens, allowing herself a moment of thought unbroken by duty or expectation. She contemplates loyalty, that brittle currency traded in whispered corridors and shadowed chambers. Every bond is a thread, every promise a rope stretched taut over a precipice. One misjudged movement, and the rope will snap. One wrong choice, and the house she guards, the legacy entrusted to her hands, will crumble like dry mortar under the weight of inevitable treachery. A voice from below interrupts, clipped and measured, a courtier speaking perhaps to another, perhaps to shadows alone. Her eyes open, meeting the empty air, seeing only reflections of herself in the polished stone. She is both witness and instrument, a steward of history, caught in a moment where the past, present, and future converge. The harpist's final note lingers, vibrating, fading, leaving a silence as deep and dangerous as any battlefield. She folds the parchment once more, pressing it against her chest. Outside, the mist begins to thin, revealing the hard lines of reality. The riders advance, their intent hidden, their arrival imminent. She steps back from the window, letting the stone cool against her skin, grounding herself in the knowledge that what is to come cannot be avoided, only met with measured heart and sharpened wits. The gallery, once a sanctuary of sound and reflection, now holds the weight of prophecy and betrayal. And as the first footfalls echo in the hall below, she breathes slowly, tasting the smoke, the lavender, the faint tang of iron in the air. The world beyond the glass waits, ready to test the fragile harmony she clings to, ready to turn music into a dirge. One wrong move, one quiet act of duplicity, and all she protects will fall. Yet in this brief, suspended moment, the harp plays on. Its voice, trembling yet steadfast, carries her through the storm to come, reminding her that even in the shadows of deceit, there is a rhythm to survival, a melody to endurance, a note that will not break. The mist swirls across the fields, and she knows that soon the world will demand more than caution. It will demand courage, cunning, and the wisdom to see the invisible hands that shape fate. The parchment waits, the riders come, and the house she guards holds its breath. The music fades, but its echo lingers, threading through the stones, the air, the hearts of all who dwell within, a prelude to the storm that will rise with the sun. Dawn seeps through the fractured panes of stained glass, spilling fractured colors across the cold stone floor of the chapel. Each beam slices the shadow in jagged patterns, as if the light itself hesitates to enter this sacred space. The air hangs thick with the scent of incense, sweet and cloying, clinging to the bones of the building like a solemn veil, reminding all who enter that even the purest faith is tempered by human frailty. The echo of a lone bell tolling in the distance reverberates through the nave, vibrating through the ribs of the old stones, announcing the awakening of a day heavy with portent. A monk kneels beside a wooden lectern, his robes whispering softly as he leans over a ledger, the parchment crackling beneath his calloused fingers. He traces each line, noting the absence of tributes, the gaps where silver or grain should have been counted. His face is pale, the morning light catching on the ridges of worry that crease his forehead. He does not yet see the subtle treachery hidden within these inked entries. For each omission, each carefully placed mark conceals the slow, silent machinery of betrayal that spins its way through the hallways and chambers of power. Unaware, he performs the ritual of his duties, writing and rewriting truth in a book that is already infected with lies. Beyond the chapel doors, the courtyard comes alive with motion. Armored men march across the cobbled stone, the clatter of their boots a percussion that echoes off the walls like a warning drum. Their banners flap and snap in the wind, colors dulled by smoke and time, yet still vibrant enough to signal the alliances that hold the fragile edifice of nobility together. Each step they take resonates with ambition, each tilt of a helm or gleam of steel a silent message of readiness, of challenge, of unseen calculations that twist like roots beneath the surface of ceremonial order. In the hall, a noble stands with a rigid poise of decorum, yet the mask of honor slips for the merest fraction of a heartbeat. He inclines his head, a bow that is at once courteous and deliberate, a gesture that carries within it the weight of clandestine communication. To the untrained eye, it is politeness. To those who watch for signs, it is a declaration, a signal to rivals and allies alike, revealing where strength may be gathered and where loyalty might be quietly abandoned. The noble's eyes, hidden behind a golden circlet, flicker with a mixture of calculation and weariness, the unspoken acknowledgement that even power here is brittle, dependent on the loyalty of men whose hearts can be swayed by gold or fear. The tapestries that hang along the walls are heavy with dust, the fibers faded yet stubborn, bearing the weight of history. They depict the triumphs of ancestors who once guarded this hall with unflinching courage, their faces stern beneath painted crowns, their hands gripping swords or scepters with divine certainty. Now, their stories whisper in a language of loss, warning of a lineage teetering on the edge of ruin. Each thread seems to murmur a cautionary tale, the echo of past glories now trembling under the strain of human frailty and ambition. Shadows of the tapestry folds twist in the morning light, as if the walls themselves were alive, watching, waiting, marking the passing of trust into suspicion. Above, perched on the parapets, the crows observe in solemn silence. Their black eyes glint in the rising sun, reflections of both omen and witness. They shift, wings stretching against the chill air, as if acknowledging the fractures forming below. Even they seem to understand the day's weight, the vows that will falter, the alliances that will crumble, and the faith that will be tested. Their cawing is restrained, measured, an unspoken dirge that frames the rhythm of courtly life, the delicate dance between honor and survival, between mercy and betrayal. Within the stone corridors, the sound of footsteps punctuates the thick, suffocating silence. The echo travels in waves, bouncing from wall to wall, carrying with it the anticipation of deeds yet to be done. The servants move quickly, shadows among shadows, passing through vaulted arches, their eyes lowered, lips pressed thin. Even in their haste, there is awareness. Every glance might betray intent. Every whispered conversation may carry the seeds of disaster. The hall is alive with tension, a network of eyes and whispers that trace the faintest tremor of ambition and fear. In the outer courtyard, the armored men begin to gather into formations that seem almost ritualistic. The clanking of metal and the rustle of banners combine with the distant tolling of the bell to create a cadence, a heartbeat of impending conflict. Each knight or footman bears the weight of his own fears and loyalties, his armor a second skin that shields not only flesh, but also the fragile confidence of a life spent under the scrutiny of the powerful. In this space, every gesture, every step, every glance is significant, as the invisible chessboard of politics and war extends from the stone walls to the open sky above. Within the chapel, the monk rises, reverence replaced by a dawning apprehension. He looks toward the doors, sensing without fully seeing the ripples of treachery that will soon unfold. The air around him seems to thicken, carrying not only incense, but the intangible scent of shifting power, of promises broken, and of loyalties quietly surrendered. The ledger closes with a soft thud, the sound striking in its finality. It is the last note of calm before the storm, a punctuation in a narrative that is about to unfold with consequences both intimate and grand. In the stillness, the monk can almost hear the future pressing forward, invisible yet inevitable. And as the light continues to fracture across the chapel floor, it illuminates the lingering perfume of betrayal that stains the stone, a presence as palpable as any living witness. Outside, banners flutter in the breeze, armor gleams with anticipation, and the whispers of history cling to every surface. Even the crows, restless on their high perches, shift with the weight of unseen knowledge. It is a morning like any other, yet everything has changed. The vows that once held together this fragile world are now measured against ambition, and the fractures that form here will ripple outward, defining a future shaped by loss, distrust, and the quiet ache of human desire. As the day opens fully, the hall exhales a long, deliberate silence. Footsteps fade into shadowed corridors, banners sway in hesitant wind, and the old tapestries seem to shiver under the gaze of the new dawn. The world within these walls has already begun to transform, and those who once believed themselves secure now find themselves at the mercy of forces subtle and unseen. The monastery, the hall, the courtyard, they all hold their breath, awaiting the unfolding of events whose consequences will stretch far beyond this morning. And in that pregnant quiet, only one truth remains. The line between faith and ambition has thinned, and nothing will ever be the same again. Moonlight drifts across the battlements, pale and deliberate, brushing the frost that clings stubbornly to a lone archer's quiver. Each arrow shivers in the cold, a brittle promise held against the dark. The wind whispers through the stone, carrying the sharp scent of pine, the distant curl of smoke from a hearth too far to warm these walls. Even the castle itself seems to hold its breath, as if it knows the weight of what will unfold before dawn. Shadows gather like conspirators in every nook, folding corners into themselves, hiding intentions as easily as the night hides the stars. Within the Lord's chamber, the candlelight flickers, throwing long, wavering shapes against the cold stone. Advisors cluster in muted conversation, voices low, each syllable measured, each pause a loaded dagger. The warmth of the hearth does little to soften the chill in the air, for in this room, loyalty is a currency as volatile as gold, and betrayal a language spoken in glances. One man leans forward, a hand brushing the table, fingers trembling ever so slightly, betraying more than he intends. Another nods, slow, deliberate, a nod that could seal fates. And between them, the Lord himself sits, silent, a crown heavy upon his brow, his eyes reflecting the dancing flame, yet hiding the storm within. Outside, the castle is a skeleton in the moonlight, battlements etched sharply against the sky, the moat below a black mirror, rippling with the distorted reflections of torches and branches. Once trusted faces are scattered across its waters, fragments of loyalty and affection turned to ghostly images, broken in the folds of ripples and shadow. Every gesture, every clasped hand, every carefully chosen word has begun to carry a dangerous weight. Friendship has become a masquerade, Promises are written in ink that can vanish with a single twist of fate. A brother-to-brother pact, forged in the fires of shared struggle, has been broken quietly, almost imperceptibly, the betrayal sliding between them like smoke through the cracks of a stone wall. A dagger, slender and cold, waits in the shadowed archway. Its presence is almost ceremonial, an unspoken punctuation in a sentence of treachery. It does not need to strike to speak its meaning. Its mere existence is a herald of severed bonds, a silent declaration that nothing will ever be as it once was. The frost on the battlements seems to reflect the tension, crystals forming and shattering underfoot like hearts in the grip of fear. The archway frames the knife in perfect symmetry, a monument to what has been lost and what is about to be taken. The air itself grows heavier, dense with the scent of impending doom, the kind that cannot be washed away by hoof fire or whispered prayers. The men within the chamber lean in, sharing words that sting, smooth as polished stone. Alliances are shifted in whispers, a quiet rearrangement of power that will echo through the generations. A hand laid on the table to seal an agreement is also a hand that can push, that can snatch away, that can betray without ever touching a weapon. And in the quiet of these exchanges, subtle glances pass between those who know. Knowledge lingers in the eyes of the silent, in the half-smile of the cautious, in the slight tightening of the jaw. Every movement becomes portentous, every breath an omen. The night itself seems to mourn the unraveling of lineage. The wind through the pines carries it like a dirge, rustling the branches against the stone walls. Snow drifts lightly against the battlements, softening edges yet deepening the silence. Even the moat seems to grieve, its black waters trembling under the silver kiss of moonlight. Reflections waver, faces melt into one another, and the sky above fractures into a web of clouds that the wind tears apart, scattering stars like shards of broken loyalty. One can almost hear the echo of generations falling into shadows, a soft, mournful sound that begins in the frost and lingers in the hollow chambers of the castle. From the battlements, the lone archer shifts, eyes scanning the horizon, muscles taut as drawn bowstrings.